The sun set in fiery brilliance over the savannah plains, casting long shadows across the golden grasslands. On one side of the valley lay Katikomor, home of the Pokot, a bustling village where life thrived under the leadership of Chief Lokidongor. Across the valley, nestled on the slopes of Mount Elgon, stood Bukwo, the proud stronghold of the Sabauts. The two communities were bound by the lifeline of River Swam, but torn apart by ancient rivalry steeped in blood, pride, and cattle. The Pokot had been nursing their wounded pride ever since the daring raid by the Sabauts a month ago. Rotino, Katikomor's wealthiest clansman, placed the village with fierce determination, his 8 wives whispering prayers of revenge. The humiliation of losing his prized cattle drove him to demand justice. It was not just about cattle, but about honor and balance. As the stars lit the night, the Pokot elders gathered at the sacred shrine of Kungwal, a hidden sanctuary where the Oloibon Loishakomol Tokirai sought guidance of the ancestors. Smoke rose from burning herbs as chants filled the air. Loshakomol's deep voice resonated. The ancestors have spoken. Revenge will be yours, but you must be patient and cunning. After 1.5 moons, your raid will succeed. Rotino and the elders sat in solemn cycle, their expressions etched with the weight of what lay ahead. The dim light of the flickering fire danced across their withered faces, casting long shadows on the walls of the council hut. A decision had to be made, a choice that could mean the difference between triumph and annihilation. It was time to select the spies who would venture into the enemy's hut. We need eyes sharper than a hawk's and minds as cunning as a jackal, Rotino said. His voice gravely whispered that carried the gravity of his words. The elders nodded in agreement, their eyes carrying the assembly of warriors who had just gathered outside. Among them were many brave men, but spies were not chosen from their courage alone. This was a task that required something far more nuanced: the ability to become invincible, to blend into the enemy's world like smoke in the wind. After a long pause, 2 figures stepped forward: Lokere and Losocha. Lokere was a wiry man with a wiry build, his skin taut over muscles honed from the years of survival in the wild. His movements were silent, like that of a leopard stalking through the tall grass. What set him apart was his gaze, a piercing, unyielding stare that seemed to see beyond the surface of things. Lokere had once tracked a wounded gazelle for 3 days, moving silently and unnoticed through the enemy's territory until he returned with a prize draped across his shoulders. Losiocha, by contrast, was a shadow, a man who could disappear in the folds of the landscape as though he were never there. His ability to mimic voices and accents was legendary, allowing him to slip into the enemy's camp undetected, posing as one of their own. He had a knack for reading people, for sensing their fears and motivations and using them to his advantage. It was said that Losiocha could hear the sound of a snake slithering through the dry grass from 100 paces away. Rotino stepped forward, his staff tapping the ground with a deliberate rhythm. Lokere, Losiocha. He began his voice with heavy purpose. You are not just warriors. You are a shadow, whispers carried on the wind. Your eyes must see what others cannot. Your ears must hear what is meant to be hidden. And above all, your hearts must remain steady, for the path you walk is paved with danger. The two men knelt, their heads bowed, as elders blessed them with sacred ash drawn from the smoldering fire. Each marked traces across their foreheads was a symbol of the qualities they needed. The eye of the eagle for vigilance, the ear of the hare for alertness, and the silent tread of the owl for stealth. As the final blessings were spoken, the fire crackled loudly, as if in agreement with the selection. Lokere and Losiocha rose their feet, their faces set with determination. Without a word, they turned and melted into the thin night, their silhouettes swallowed by the vast darkness of the valley. They will not return until they carried out with them the knowledge needed to strike, and strike hard. For a week, Lokere and Losiocha maneuvered through the wilderness. They drank from dew-laden leaves, evaded the prowling hyenas, and lay motionless for hours, hidden in the tall grass. From the peaks of Camtail, they observed the Sabaot manyatas. Smoke spiraled from the cooking fires, and herds grazed lazily in the bush and lush valley. At night, the spies crept close, counting livestock and mapping the layout of Buko village. As the shadows of the night deepened and the valley lay still, the air around Buko seemed to hum with unseen energy. In a secluded manyata, lit the only faint glow of the embers, the Sabaot Laibon sat cross-legged. His face was calm, but his mind was restless, like a river swirling under the still surface. That night, sleep came reluctantly. When it did, it carried with it a vision, a haunting clarity that pierced through the veil of dreams. In his mind's eye, the Oloibon saw an eggshell, delicate and translucent. Through it, a pair of unblinking eyes stared back at him, cold and calculating. The shell cracked, but instead of yolk, shadows spilled forth, slithering across the land like serpents. A chill ran down his spine as the vision shifted. He saw tall grass ripple, not with the wind, but with movements too deliberate to be natural. Then he heard it. Whispers carried by the night. Voices too soft for human ears. Voices of those who did not belong. The Olebon woke up with a start. Beads of sweat clinging his brow. His breath came in sharp gasps, as though looked around the dimly lit hut, the faint scent of the herbs and ash filling his nostrils. He closed his eyes again, searching the lingering traces of his vision's meaning. The Pokot are here, he murmured to himself, his voice barely audible, but cracked through the fire. They walked around us, unseen, like shadows in the grass. He reached for his staff, adorned with charms and beads, and tapped it twice on the earth floor. The sound reverberated, waking up a young apprentice who slept nearby. "Summon the elders," the Oloibon commanded, his tone leaving no room for hesitation. "The spirits have spoken. We must prepare." Even as his apprentice scrambled to fulfill the order, the Oloibon rose to his feet. He stepped outside, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. The village lay quiet, unaware of the danger creeping closer. The Oloibon's senses prickled his instincts, screaming that they were being watched. "Eyes that see through the shell. He whispered to the night, his grip tightening on the staff. "Pokot spies hiding among us. But the spirits see all. We will find you." Far away, on the peaks of Camtail, Lokere and Losiocha lay motionless, their breath swallowed as they studied the village below. They had no idea their presence had been felt, not by human eyes, but by the keen, unrelenting gaze of the spiritual realm, again to symbolize a new day. Two figures stumbled into view on the edge of the Pokot village. Their silhouettes fragile against the growing sky. Lokere and Luciucha moved with the halting steps of men who had fought the wilderness and barely survived. The villagers saw them first. A group of children playing near the thorny kraal. Cries of recognition rose, and as soon as the entire village came alive, women rushed forward, ululating in high-pitched harmony. Their voices carried the joy and relief of a community reunited with its lost sons. Men gathered behind them, their faces alight with pride. Their spears raised to salute the refuting heroes, as it was not easy for spies to set on a mission and come back alive. Lokere and Losiocha were ushered into the central manyata. The elders waited solemnly, their expressions a mixture of respect and anticipation, as the spies collapsed on their knees before them. The air grew heavy with silence. Lokere's parched lips trembled as he spoke, his voice hoarse yet steady. "The Sabaoths, they have grown blind, but the storm is brewing across the valley." The crowd erupted in celebration, their joy a thunderous roar that filled the morning air. Women sang songs of gratitude to the ancestors, while men chanted war cries in unison. The spies were lifted high on strong shoulders, their frailty momentarily forgotten as the village honored their courage and sacrifice. In that moment, the struggles of the wilderness, the hunger, the exhaustion, the danger were overshadowed by the triumph and their return as the promise of the fight to come. The Pokot warriors trained relentlessly. They sharpened their spears, they polished their arrows, and sang ancient war songs that stirred the courage in their hearts. Youthful warriors led by the exuberant Kibet Kasait, practiced with unbridled enthusiasm, their chants blending with the rhythmic pounding of drums. The night before the raid, Loshakomol performed the final blessing. Warriors abstained from their spouses, their minds focused on the task ahead. At about 8 p.m., under the crescent moon, they departed in 3 groups. Their movement as silent as shadows. The raid had begun. The mission had begun. The moon hung high in the cloudless sky, its pale light casting eerie shadows over Bukwo village. Silence blanketed the valley, broken only by the occasional bleating of goats and the soft rustling of leaves in the cool night breeze, as it was the kind of silence that preceded a storm. A storm the sabots could not yet see. At precisely 10 p.m., the first wave of the Pokot warriors melted out of the darkness, their forms blending with the shadows as they took positions around the village. Faces smeared with ash and dirt. They crouched low, their every moment deliberate, their breaths low. The sharp eyes of Kibet Kasait swept over the terrain as he signaled silently his second group. They moved like phantoms, waving through the torn fences and slipping past the sentries without a sound. The cattle bombers loomed ahead, wooden enclosures brimming with livestock. Their pungent scent, thick in the night air, Kibet's heart pounding in his chest, not from fear, but the exhilaration of the hunt. With swift motion in his hand, one warrior approached the bomber gate. He pulled out a finely crafted blade. With precise and practiced movement, he severed the bindings, the fibers parting like silk. The gate creaked softly as it would swing open, and the Pokot slipped inside, herding the cattle with their whispers and gentle taps on the flanks. But danger lurked. From atop nearby hut, Chemarich's sharp-eyed watchman stared, his instincts tingling. He squinted into the dark, his ears straining for the faintest sound. Then he saw it, a shadow where there should have been none. Without hesitation, he grabbed his horn and blew 3 short blasts that shattered the stillness. The village awoke in chaos. The Sabot warriors poured out of their huts. The Pokot had no time to regroup. The Sabots came at them like flood. The air was thick with the acrid smell of sweat and blood. Spears clashed with shields. The metallic clang reverberating like a blacksmith's forge. Kibet glanced back at the village. The cattle were streaming towards the river, headed by his men. The plan was holding, but the Sabots were not giving up. Finally, the last of the cattle crossed the river, their hooves kicking up spray as they splashed through the shallows. It was tough. It was tough. It was not an easy battle. The Pokot had what they had come for, but the cost was high. As they disappeared into the night, the village of Bukwo smoldered in the distance, its people left shaken and scared. The raid was over, but the war between the Pokot and the Sebei had only begun. As dawn approached, the Pokot warriors successfully drove hundreds of cattle, goats, and sheep across the river Swam. The backline squad held firm against desperate Sebei attempts to recover their livestock. Finally, the animals safely on the Pokot land, and the warriors retreated into the dense bush, disappearing like ghosts. When the warriors returned to Katikomor, the village erupted in jubilation. Women ululated, children danced, and drums thundered in celebration. The Oloibon, Loisha Komol Tokirai, stood at the center of the village, his arms raised in gratitude to the ancestors.